welcome you all to the launch of Yukti, where we are trying to, I think, create an alternative imagination, open up the space and create alternative imaginations to go beyond the noose that we are going to be stuck in. I think the government has announced that the debt restructuring will be concluded in June, which means that our fate is going to be sealed for the foreseeable future. And we are looking forward for elections, new governments, but the parties or the political power alliances that are going to come to power in the coming months will have this sealed fate, and we are going to be put inside the debtor's prison. Of course, it's not an enclosure, but an open prison, right? Where our fiscal and economic, monetary and economic sovereignty will be sealed. So Ahilan and Madhulika pointed out how IMF is not the arbiter. It is actually the part of a problem. It is the part of the problem. That the fact that we are going to the IMF for the 17th time. And if you look at the world experiences from Africa to Latin America, we have enough evidences to show that IMF is not the answer. It is part of the problem. And we are, I think, now loudly acknowledging today that the second default is built in to the plan. And how the second default will be, we saw that the first default already has beaten the working people. Their pension funds have borne the exclusive brunt of a domestic debt restructuring. And can we even imagine what the second default will have, right? What will be the consequences, and would we have the resilience to face the second default? Because we are, and I think as Ahilan and Madhulika pointed out, unlike previous IMF engagements, 17th engagement has been making permanent changes to the Sri Lankan socio-economic polity and political polity. They are emphasizing on legal reforms. So our character of the Sri Lankan state and our society and the economy has been radically changed. We are dismantling the developmental infrastructure of our economy, right? We are in the course of a privatization process, and we might be opening up our public enterprises to the grabs of some of these bondholders. I think we have woken up to the possibilities with VFS and Blackstone being one of the investors, right? Blackstone is already in Sri Lanka. They have invested in Primal Glass. So they are already there. And we don't know about we don't even know who our bondholders are, because 72% of the bondholders are hidden. We don't know about them. We only know a couple of them. So this is the scenarios that we are dealing with. So, and I think Ahilan also spoke about how we should really dissent the solutions that we are presented with, form an alliance. The other developing countries are already getting into alliances. In Africa, in Latin America, Sri Lanka cannot fight this alone. There has to be a southern alliance of developing countries. And I would like to, I'm not going to actually speak about the private creditors, but about this, speak more to the new nature of this debt crisis that we are in, and to open up a discussion for a possible pathway that Sri Lanka has not, we in Sri Lanka, has kind of shied away from. That's the odious debt discourse. So, many of you would know what odious debt is. Basically, there are two criteria to determine what odious debt is. One criteria will be that the debt incurred have not spent in the interest of the public. that the debt is not used for the public investments for the benefit of the larger public. The other one will be to talk about the creditors' responsibility, that we all talk about debt restructuring, and the government and the bondholders have, and the Paris Club have presented their deals. So it seemed like that we are bounded to this fate of repaying our debt at whatever cost. We mean the working people of Sri Lanka, right? And we don't seem to have any kind of negotiation or space to negotiate, space to arbitrate, right? Space to demand a greater cut of our debt stock. This is what we at least see from what the government present to us. The debt restructuring deal that the government presented is worse than the debt restructuring deal that the bondholders have presented, right? So we wonder, like, on whose side does the government stand? On whose side does the central bank stand? So then we would wonder whether maybe the government is kind of helpless. So what kind of debt negotiation platform leads a government, a sovereign government? I think let's forget that this particular government does not have a mandate, but they are representing a sovereign country, Sri Lanka, right? So what kind of debt restructuring platform or a framework leads a sovereign government helpless, right? So I think I think that also speaks to the nature of the international financial architecture that the IMF and the World Bank tries to safeguard, that they are coming again and again by pretending to bail us out, but in fact trying to trap us into this particular system. So in my opinion, odious debt provides us a way out. So by pointing out that, I mean, there's the responsibility is also at the level of the creditors. It's not only at the level of the indebted country and the people. In Sri Lanka, I think we talk about corruption. It is part of our daily conversation, right? We have, gone through Aragalaya, where the corruption of the political elite and the economic elite made the headlines. And I think that was a greater impetus in driving Aragalaya itself. And our political parties talk about corruption and need for good governance. The IMF itself has come up with the governance diagnostic report and point out at corruption as making it seem like a private problem, that it is this developing third world poor countries plagued with corruption. But the problem is that corruption, if you look at how it has worked over decades, corruption is actually part of the strategy. The ruling elite and the economic elite from 1977 have made use of corruption to dismantle the public state, the public services and the public infrastructure. So it is actually the gateway for their private interest, right? Privatization is, to legitimize privatization. But I think we in the left, in the progressive circles, though as much as we are acknowledging corruption, have not incorporated corruption into the discussion of debt, public debt. If we do, I think odious debt should not seem like a kind of a, hypothetical scenario. Because odious debt is, there are countries, even in the recent past, there's concrete examples of where countries from the developing countries use the odious debt framework. And odious debt is not only a hypothetical thing, there's a legal doctrine, the doctrine of odious debt. They have used countries like Ecuador, Iraq in 2003, Ecuador in 2007 and 8, used the doctrine of odious debt or illegitimate debt to reduce their debt stock in a significant proportion. So it gives us a leverage, actually, leverage to fight with the bondholders and the other bilateral and multilateral creditors. Like we have acknowledged that multilateral debt in Sri Lanka will not be restructured. We are paying. ADB is the largest multilateral creditor in Sri Lanka. So while we are shying away from the odious debt framework, we already have the ground material. The Auditors General Department has done the groundwork and have given us the preliminary material to begin our task. So I'd like to kind of quote from 3 special Auditor General reports presented in 2018, 2019, and 2022. So there, the Auditor General remarks, by December 31st, 2016, gap between total debt payable by government of Sri Lanka and value of total debt finance assets was 7.8 trillion Sri Lankan rupees. So this is the gap between the borrowing and the assets, debt finance assets. So the total debt payable stood at 2016 stood at 8.9 trillion, and total assets was only worth of 1.1 trillion. So where did this gap, where did the money go if the loans did not materialize in creating concrete assets? And the Auditor General's report points out that significant portion of the net borrowing was used for recurrent purposes. So it's like for daily needs, right? And there's a lot of problems in accounting public debt and debt finance assets. Central Bank is and Ministry of Finance and Treasury, they are the key responsible government entities to record these transactions, as well as the central bank has an extra responsibility because they have the mandate to manage public debt. And the Auditor General points out towards the culpability of the central bank for that they have not accomplished its responsibility for operating borrowings to maximize benefits for the public. And he also finds non-compliance with laws, rules, and regulations in case of foreign borrowing. So this preliminary material gives us enough room and substance to construct the odious debt campaign, to demand or to call that Sri Lanka's public debt is as odious. Then I think we can demand, I think as Ahilan pointed out, we cannot agree that IMF is the arbiter, they are not. So we can demand for an international commission, independent international commission, or we ourselves can formulate a commission and conduct a debt audit, like other countries, like the Ecuador, and Mexico, or even in Greece, though in Greece it failed. All these countries conducted debt audits to understand the nature of the legitimacy of the debt composition. And there are international experts, if we want to call for their assistance. Eric Toussaint from CADTM has worked a lot on third world debt and illegitimate debt. There is Lyon's Nidhi Kumani and James Boyce from University of Perry Institute from University Amherst. Then there are others like Michael Hudson who have spoken in great deal about odious debt. I think there are these options that we should pursue, right, without waiting in silence or being helpless before our fate is sealed into the debtor's prison. Thank you.